Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the CJAG webinar, Resolving Parental Conflicts in the Family Court. My name is Babs Akinyoju, and I am the founder of CJAG and your host tonight. CJAG stands for the Criminal Justice Advisory Group. I have been leading this group for about 12 months now. And usually I host webinars with the aim of improving criminal justice. And most of the events I have held over the past 12 months have been really focused on, like I say, criminal justice procedure, both in the UK and in Nigeria. And usually around this time of year, even before I formed CJAG, I used to hold events on domestic abuse in line with the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, which is an international campaign. This time I decided to take a slight detour and look into family law with a specific focus on parents and children. By way of background, I'm a family lawyer and I work in the family courts in England and Wales. If I may just read out a quotation, which I think just encapsulates what tonight is about. This is by a report called "What About Me?" written by the Family Solutions Group. And this group is made up of professionals in the family justice system in England and Wales. So what it says is that it is crucial to recognize that children are at risk of harm when parents separate. Family breakdown is a time of great vulnerability, and research has consistently shown that unresolved parental conflict is harmful to the children. This destructive interparental conflict affects children of all ages across infancy, childhood, adolescence, and even adulthood. The way in which parents communicate with each other impacts children's long-term mental health and future life chances. So with this in mind, we have three experts in their fields who would be talking about resolving parental conflicts in the justice system. My first speaker is Ruth Duckworth. Ruth works for Action for Children, which is a children's charity created to help vulnerable children and young people and their families in the UK. Action for Children runs parenting programs that support families and caregivers around the UK. And these programs are designed to help parents and children bond, learn, or overcome difficulties. In the 2 years, 2019 to 2020, Action for Children helped almost 400,000 children. So without further ado now, I will hand over to Ruth. Thank you.
Thank you. It's so great to join you today. Thanks for introducing me. So my name is Ruth Duckworth. I work for Action for Children. I have been a part of them for 7 years now. I initially started off as a family support worker. I also deliver the Separated Parenting Information Program, which I'm going to be talking about today. And I also do some digital parenting support as well in my role. So just in this time, I'm just going to give you sort of a bit of a flavour of the Separated Parenting Information Program. I'm going to show some slides and give you a bit of an idea. And I think it's so important, it's so true what was said, to recognise that actually the impact that conflict does have on children actually when parents have separated. And that's a lot of what we talk about, a lot of what we look at actually in the course. That is a 3.5-hour course. So obviously I'm not going to go through all of it, but actually just give you a bit of an idea. So just to mention, actually, the course is by Kafkas. So just, I think the second slide sort of mentioned about Kafkas. So Kafkas is Children and Family Court Advisory Service. And so Kafkas exists, if it's okay to move the slide on, if that's possible. So Kafkas exists for the voices of children in the court process. So just understanding when families and parents go through court over things like contact, etc. Kafkas is there in order to really have the voices of the children heard and to take into consideration around the best decisions for them. If it's possible to have slide 3, I don't know who's doing the slides, but would that be okay? So what can you expect? So to learn about what children emotions and how conflict affects them, to learn how to manage conflict through effective communication, and to learn how to focus on next steps, moving forward and next steps as co-parents. So these are the things that we talk about with the parents. So they have an understanding of the sort of journey we're going on over the few hours that we're together, and really explaining. So these are then broken, these are the focus of what we're talking about. And actually, as you can see, the children are at the center. You know, I say to these parents, you might be questioning why you're here right now. You might not even want to be here, but actually just think you're doing this for your child. It's about seeing through their eyes. It's about hearing through their voices, having them at the center. And then I explained that these are broken down into 4 modules. So that's slide 4, please. And so on slide 4, it's explaining, so your journey, children, communication and emotions. And we're just going to look at a few things from each section. And then they do activities, group work, there's video clips, written work, listening and discussion. And by focusing on what they can do as a parent and not what their co-parent does. So with SPIP, there is a handbook that you can all download. If you go on the Kafkas website, that's free for anybody to download. And there's more information about SPIP as well. But that's all the sort of things I'm showing from the slides, but also we say to the parents from the programme, we send them the link to this to download. So that's for them to have a look at as well. The next slide is actually, when I've asked the question to the parents, how do you feel about being here today? These are the responses I've got. And actually, this is quite regular. So saying things like, I know it all already, I'm willing to do anything to help my children. I don't think it will make any difference. I don't think it's appropriate with my situation. I'm hoping if I do it, my ex-partner will. This is for my ex-partner, not me. I'm glad I'm on the course. Or I feel like I've been put on the naughty step. And just the other day, someone said that. And I say to them, you know, I know you've been asked to attend, but actually it's about drawing a line under what's gone before. It's not saying that that doesn't matter, but it's about moving forward. And actually, I really hope all of them go away with hope through doing the course. And it's about learning together. It's about taking those opportunities. But actually, I'd say it's not about them feeling guilty, because actually it's really important to set that scene from the start for them to do. So the next bit's really important, actually, thank you. The safety of children and adults is paramount. Now, this is when we say, you know, it's an information program, not an individual one. Because actually we know all sorts of different people come on the courses, people that have experienced abuse, where actually communicating with the other parent isn't appropriate or isn't safe to do so, or even contact with them. So to just make it really clear that they know their situation, they know what's safe and appropriate to apply, and also to not go against anything all the court have put in place, that it's really important that they kind of bear that in mind. And but the other thing is actually that they have an open mind, and that actually they're open to take something away from the course, because actually I do think there's something for everybody in this course, no matter what their situation is. So we make that really clear. Next slide, please. So these are just some statistics that we share with the parents around separation, recognizing that they're not alone, as we can see that on the slides. But actually the thing to emphasize, it's not unusual for children to be in a single or lone parent family, they can adjust to that change. But what they struggle to adjust to is the level of conflict they're exposed to. And actually, that's something we then go on and talk about with them in a bit more detail. The next slide, please. Slide 10. So this is the first within the first module, and we talk to them about conflict, and actually say to them, actually, we might think of conflict, we might think of obvious things, we might think of shouting or physical or aggressive, but can you think of the more subtle things of conflicts that actually that force children into conflict, subtle things that force children into conflict? Now, some people will really struggle with this because all they see is the shouting, the physical and aggressive. But actually, things like putting children in the middle, alienating a parent, asking children questions that make them feel uncomfortable, passive aggressive behavior, sarcasm, ignoring the other parent, silence, name calling, unkind comments, putting someone down, forcing children to choose sides, point scoring. These are all things that can be very subtle, but can really impact on children. And actually, it's for parents to sort of just realize that. And actually, quite often they kind of get that light bulb moment and just think, actually, yeah, I know, I've done that, I've said that. Again, it's not about making them feel guilty, it's just making them recognize it and think, actually, what's that effect? And then we talk about the effects. We talk about behavior things. That's what affects children. We see them either suppress and hide emotions or feelings, or being angry and aggressive. We see them struggle to self-regulate, so actually go from really calm to really just angry and excited, or just over, they're kind of overwhelmed with emotion that they can't control. They might be people pleasing or peacekeeping, which is when they're trying to manage the environment around them. They might be quite clingy. They might struggle to go between homes. And we talk about this, and the kind of goal around it is for them to recognize and realize the impact that conflict actually has on children. Excuse me. And the other thing to make them aware is that actually we want to teach children about positive conflict. We want to teach them that actually for them to have a voice, that they should be able to share their views. And things like debates are really good in order for training grounds for that with children and young people. It brings about real communication, can open up important issues and release pent up emotion, anxiety and stress. So we're teaching them about that, but it's about identifying the destructive, which lowers confidence, self-esteem, security, can divert energies from more important issues, destroys creativity, hardens attitudes and causes aggressive or violent behavior. And that's what we're saying. So it's making those parents really aware. And the next slide I've added in, which is something we talk about a lot here, as well as this role, I also deliver courses to professionals about domestic abuse. And actually this is, we talk a lot about adverse childhood experiences. And, divorce or separation is one of those. And actually, I think, like was said at the beginning, the impact that these things can have on children and actually on, their childhood, but also when they're adults, and how those things can affect. And actually, when we're talking about conflict, it's realizing the impact that has on them, that actually whatever's been modeled to them, whatever they've had growing up is normal. And so they can then replicate that behavior or how someone's treating another, thinking that's normal. And so that's a big kind of thing. I've just added this, but I think it's important to recognize and sort of remember that really. Could I have the next slide, please? So this is the journey. So we talk, this is an activity and exercise for the parents to do and really look at this and think, where are things right now from their perspective? Now, this is challenging for them because quite often it's very easy to think that other person should be doing this or that. And actually we make it clear that it's not about the other parent, because they're not there to defend themselves. They're not there to have that voice. Today is about them and their child. So it's actually thinking about how are things right now from their perspective. And we show the two lines of roads and whether they feel they're on that straight road or that windy road, and actually getting them really to think about what they can do. They can only do what they can do. You can't change anyone. You can't make anyone do anything. And so, I encourage them by doing the course, they're on that straight road. And initially people will probably say they're on the windy road, but when they do the exercise, they'll realize they're on the straight road, because they can only do, or there's a few challenges. Quite often giving the emotional energy to the conflict is quite a challenge, and trying to prove the other person's in the wrong is also a challenge for them. So what goes alongside this is the highway code. And again, this is for children. So try not to fight in front of them or ask them to choose sides. Accept children have different feelings to the parent. Think about what you could do, not what the other parent should or shouldn't do. Focus on what's worked, not what hasn't worked. Remember, small steps can lead to big changes, and look after yourself and be the best parent you can be. Okay, so on to module 2, so children's needs and feelings. And we show this slide, and this is harmful roles. These are roles that children can take on. And actually they do take on, which maybe without parents necessarily realizing. Could I have the next slide? It's just explaining a little bit. So a spy, thinking that's what children end up doing. They feel like that spy. Maybe when they've come back from a parent's house, they're then asked, you know, about the parent's new partner or the size of the TV. And what happens is children are very clever. They know the emotional response that question will prompt. They'll read the face of the parent, and they'll either hide information or they'll lie, because they want to please that parent. They want to protect them. The messenger, you know, is it appropriate messages that are being passed between parents? Is there apps that can be used, or is there a communication diary or book that they can use instead? That children take on emotions of adults and feelings, and they may seem like they can cope with parents or their parents' emotions, but actually that's when they become anxious or struggle with their mental health. Judging, when they hear bits of information and then they try and go to the other parent to defend them, that can make them feel very distressed and confused. And witnessing, seeing or hearing conflicts between parents is very stressful. The child hears something very negative about a parent, and then somebody says, haven't you got nice hair? Or, you know, haven't you got nice eyes? They actually want to reject that part of themselves because they look like the parent that they're hearing negative things about. So these are quite powerful, but I think quite important to show. We also talk about what it looks like for children to thrive. And actually in the video, we talk about what does that mean, that word mean. And actually that's the goal, isn't it, for every parent, for children to be thriving. And in order for them to thrive, all these things need to be fulfilled. And it's the same for parents to think, actually, am I thriving? Are all these things fulfilled in my life? So I'm able to thrive as well. So the next thing is the voice of children. That's from the video that we show. So if we could have the next slide, please. So these are just some sort of comments that children have said, which is really powerful and really does sort of trigger some parents, I think, just hearing that. So much of it is child focused. It is about the child. And the first one particularly is about a child who remembered her dad leaving. She spilt spaghetti. It went everywhere. Oh, sorry, I can hear a bit of noise. I'm not sure if somebody can mute. Sorry, just hearing a little bit of noise in the background. Yeah, this girl spilt spaghetti. Sorry, I was muted as well. She remembered she spilt spaghetti and her dad left, and she thinks if she was good, maybe he'll come back. And we just explain the importance of explaining things to children in an age-appropriate way. Because if she had known that she was going to have 2 homes and this is what it was going to look like, she can adjust to that change. And all these are the voices of children, and really highlighting actually how it's so important to listen. They want to be heard, and I think that's so much in this. The next thing is about how to respond to children when they ask difficult questions, which does happen. And the key thing again is this message of listening. Listen and validate their feelings so they feel valued and heard. And actually, that's all children, and that's all of us. We all want to be listened to. We all want to be validated, our feelings validated. We want to be valued and heard. And actually, this model is key. And the first part of that is the feelings and emotions. Because if they get that part, as long as they change it in a way The goal is to make the child's world okay, and then they can move on. And so this, often I say to parents, take a picture of it. You know, this is something you can refer back to. And then linked to that, we talk about feelings and emotions. So recognizing the, we've got the feelings and emotions wheel, and just obviously us as adults, I'm sure we look at all of these and have probably been through all of them. We know the words, but for children, quite often it can be something physical. They can have a stomach ache. They can be quite clingy. There's all sorts of things. They might have butterflies, lots of things going on that's indicating that they're maybe not feeling quite right. So the importance of teaching them about the words, actually the words, but also the emotion that goes with them. And just really giving opportunity again to listen to children, creating time with creating space to do that. And there's a few books and resources that I've got on these slides that I recommend to parents, I think, just to help with feelings and emotions. There's films, there's a few books. Those are particularly around anxiety. The invisible string actually is a really good one around separation anxiety. So if children struggle to go between homes, that's actually a fantastic book, and I'm constantly recommending that. And it's the connotation that even though they're not together, they're always joined together through an invisible string. I was working with two parents who had separated, actually doing some sort of family support work, and they were saying their 8-year-old daughter was really anxious about going, the mum was saying she was anxious about going to the dad's because didn't want to leave the mum, and she mentioned this book to her, and the dad had it on Audible, and actually the mum said the girl's anxiety just reduced down so quickly. And so, you know, I think books are so powerful. A couple of others for sort of older readers as well. And then the next slide is just some suggestions of things you could do with children to get them to talk or to help them with their worries, or things like worry monsters, or creating a worry box, using bubbles or pinwheels, having emotion and feelings cards as well. So there's sort of lots of just suggestions, sort of make it really interactive, I think, for parents as well. So the next thing is talking about what children need and don't need. So actually this stage, I asked the parents, what would you say children don't need? And they list pretty much these kind of things. So that they understand they don't need to see or hear parents complain about each other, to hear criticism or negative comments about either parent, to adult information about the reason for the separation or detail about child support, to feel they may be asked to choose one parent over the other, to pass information from one parent to the other, to feel like an outsider in one parent's home. And then we look at what they need. They need to be told what's happening and how their lives will change. They need to know it's not their fault. Though that goes back to the girl with the spaghetti with that comment. She thought it was her fault her dad left because she spilt it everywhere, and nobody said, and he got cross, and nobody said it's not your fault. To know it's okay to feel angry and sad. Or we want children to know they can show all emotions. We want to help them through that, and for them to know it's okay. They don't have to be happy all the time. We want them to show how they're feeling. To know that it's fine to talk and ask questions and to be listened to know their parents understand how they feel and still love them, to feel good about loving both parents, to know it's all right to have different family rules in different homes, to be allowed to distance themselves so not drawn in, to have a predictable routine with consistent boundaries. Children crave boundaries. They push against them until they become a solid wall, and then they feel safe. To know they have two homes where they belong. So not just visiting a parent, but both places home. To be able to stay in contact with wider family or siblings, etc. To have access to other types of support. To have hope for the future, and above all, be allowed to be children. The next bit I'm just going to go through is about communication, a really important part. I do say at the start of this, you know, if people aren't communicating with the other parent, if they can't, then these are really good general communication skills, because I don't want them to switch off at this point, because actually it's a really good section and really sort of makes us think. So this is called Getting It Right for Children When Parents Part. So again, so child focused. So it's looking at staying calm. That's the first one. Thinking about actually when you start to get stressed, what does that look like? And there's some things on the staying calm just to show us, and asking if they can relate to that. There's also, and then thinking actually when we get stressed, if we don't catch that, what kicks in, it's the fight, flight and freeze. And actually, it's similar to the stress response. It's the threat response. An event is interpreted by the primitive part of the brain. It's the part of the brain we probably all know, but if you saw a lion, you wouldn't write a list of pros and cons. You would either run or you would fight. And that's what we're talking about. And when we feel overwhelmed, what happens is the front part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, where our thinking, our rationalizing, our learning is, disconnects, and it's the amygdala, it's the emotion center that takes over. So actually, that's what happens. And in that state, we react. And when we react, the other person's in control. When we respond, we're in control. So the key thing is to notice the triggers, to notice how to calm down, to notice breathing, so that connection's made in the brain again. So you can think, rationalize, and learn. And so you're able to respond rather than react. And the next thing is really just tips around communication. So thinking about listening, what that looks like, the importance of listening. Also sort of seeing it differently. So being curious is, they might be surprised or wrong about what they expect to hear. Don't assume the worst. And that's really important. The next bit, really looking at I or we or neutral language, thinking about how do we communicate. If we use you all the time, that's very critical, judgmental, and actually that response could be that attack, because when we feel under attack, we can be quite defensive back. And so it's about rewording it in a way that actually for the person to respond, reminding them they're responding about something really, communicating about something really important to do with their child or children. So it's important what's going on here. Clear communication is really important, and thinking about why they're communicating. So these are just really good kind of tips in terms of communication, and thinking about actually how best to do that, taking that step back. Actually, if if somebody received an email or a text, they don't have to respond instantly, because if you receive it, you respond out of a place of emotion. So we say, wait, write a draft, get somebody else to write it, or somebody else, they could take the emotion out of that situation. And the next bit is, tips if you're dealing with difficult conversations, focus on what they can control, stay calm, think about what difference could this make in a year's time. There could be something that's being discussed at that time, and actually in a year that could look very different. And try not to get in an argument about what really happens, because people experience things differently. And then the last section is about emotions, because actually we're really aware the impact that separation and divorce can have on parents and children. And actually we talk about that. We talk about, them having that understanding. We talk about the loss cycle and recognizing the stages of the loss cycle, the denial, the shock of what's happened, the anger, that's when people feel it's their fault. The energy levels are at the highest, but actually they might be overreacting or acting in an irrational way. The bargaining, the questioning why, the guilt, the shame, they feel it's their fault. The energy levels start to drop. The depression, the what's the point, the despair, the apathy, the sleeplessness, the energy levels are at the lowest. And then the moving forward, the hope for the future. And actually with the loss cycle, it's quite often, I think it's just language to what people have experienced. They'll see it and think, yes, I've been through that. And it's important for them to recognize that where they're at it, and it's not just one line, as we probably know, there's lots of lines all over the place. It's possible to go through them in a space of 10 minutes, but as well as themselves and the other parent, but the child will be going through the loss cycle. So again, it's putting back to the child. We talk about the importance of looking after themselves. I use the aeroplane analogy that putting your oxygen mask on before anyone else's. And as a parent, so often parents will want to look after their child first and then look after themselves, but it has to be the other way around. Because if all the emotional energy is on the conflict, they're going to have no capacity for that child, where maybe they come with a difficult question or they're talking about the other parent. So it's really important to look after themselves, to seek out counselling if they need that as well. And we talk about kind of who is around them, who can help them with that. And the importance of counselling as well is key to get support themselves. We talk about their support network and get them to share who that is and what that looks like. And then we also talk about mediation. So mediation, is really important. We talk about it at the start, and we do talk about it. So I think it's slide 49. We do talk about it again because some of them have experienced it and maybe had a difficult experience. But we explain that actually it might not have been right yesterday. It might not be right today, but it might be right tomorrow. Because sometimes when people go to mediation, if both people are feeling angry, they feel it's each other's fault. It's very difficult to mediate under those circumstances. So actually it's about them thinking if it's appropriate to revisit that. The other thing we talk about is the parenting plan. Now, this is a plan written out, worked out between parents after they separate that must put the best interest of the children first. It sets that shared commitment to the children and their future. So it's looking at things like education, health, communication. It could be how often they see their grandparents, whatever's important to both parents. They both fill it out, and then it's a workable plan. And then I just want to show you on slide 55. Can you show 50? Sorry, 50. Oh yeah, 55. That's it. Sorry, 54. Sorry. Thank you. Hopefully you can all see that. And this was what people said at the end of the course, which actually I'm just encouraged by seeing every time when I ask. And, you know, this is what they've said, this is what they'll do now. At handover, they'll speak to the other parent rather than ignore them. Take time before responding to an email they've received. Communicate more with the co-parent. Notice the impact their actions have on the other parent. Try and co-parent. Listen to their children. Try and see things from the other parent's perspective. Use some of the resources to talk to their child about emotions and feelings. Be aware of what they're putting on their child. Get counselling. Be aware of questions they're asking their child so they don't feel like a spy. Try more with the other parent, or be more aware of the impact it has on their child or children. Which to me just shows the importance. Sorry, it just shows me the importance of this course and actually the difference that it's making. At the end of that course, that's the sort of message that people are coming away with. So thank you. I hope that's been interesting to all of you. And you can download the handbook from CAFCAS. So if you want to find out more information, that's on the CAFCAS website that you can have a look at. Oh, not the other bit. But if you want to stop sharing this slide, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. And I know you've kind of cantered through, you know, the course, because when it's ordered by the court, you know, we tell the parents it's a 4-hour course, and prior to lockdown, each parent will attend a course that is local to them, and they'll be there with other parents. They wouldn't be there with the you know, their ex-partner or ex-spouse, but they'll be there with other parents, so they'll be able to exchange, you know, all these ideas and so forth. Since the pandemic, the course has been run online. But when the parties come back to court, you know, we do ask them, how did they find the course? And they, you know, the comments that you have shown have been mirrored in court. One kind of recent development in assisting with communication are the parenting apps, the parenting applications, which can be downloaded. So some, like, there's one called Our Family Wizard, and another one called.
Is it app Close as well?
Yeah, there's App Close.
Yeah.
Yes. So there are a whole range of them now, and I think what they do is that I was trying to scramble for information, but I think I left my hard copy in the office. But what these applications do, and like I said, they're apps that, you know, they're downloaded onto the smartphone, and they can be used as communication tools. So if previously, you know, father, you know, was sending an email or text or WhatsApp to mother about, you know, when can I see my son or daughter? Now they can do that via the app. And I think what the app does is that it monitors the language used, to ensure that it's not antagonistic, and it can be kept as a record, can be used as evidence if necessary. And I think it also has a calendar so that it helps parents to plan. So, for example, what's happening over, say, Christmas holidays or half term, who's collecting, or how do they split the summer holidays so that they can fill in their schedules in advance. I mean, with a lot of these apps, there's a subscription. I think you pay either a monthly subscription or annually. I think it's about £100 a year for some of them, but some are free, like AppClose. AppClose is a free app. And as far as I'm aware, it's available. I mean, a lot of these apps are developed in America, so they're probably available worldwide, and not just in the UK. But thank you for that. And if I may just say, if you have any questions for Ruth, please just place them in the chat, and we'll deal with any questions or comments after we've heard from the other speakers. And please remember to keep your mics on mute. So if I may move on now to our next speaker, Odette Untambara. Yes, that's Odette, all the way from Kigali in Rwanda. So Odette is a communications professional with over 5 years working experience in the private and not-for-profit sectors. She's currently the Save the Children Rwanda's Communications and Advocacy Manager with an interest in humanitarian communications. Odette is a trained facilitator of the Alternatives to Violence project with an academic background in social work and communication science. She has been facilitating in communities in South Africa, Rwanda, and Ethiopia, and has been co-treasurer of the Alternatives to Violence Project AVP International since 2017. So thank you, Odette.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Babatunde. Wait for the slide. While we wait for that, so good evening. So my name is Odette, as Babatunde has just mentioned. I am currently the Communication and Advocacy Manager for Save the Children Rwanda and Burundi country office. But today I will be speaking to you as a facilitator for AVP, which is Alternatives to Violence. So I'll be using the term abbreviation AVP for quite a bit, but it stands for Alternatives to Violence Project. So thank you so much for the organizers for having me and for giving me this space to speak to you all. Well, let's just get right into it then. So you can move to the next slide. So what is AVP International? So AVP, Alternatives to Violence Project, is an international voluntary movement which organizes workshops to empower people to lead a nonviolent life. So I've been affiliated with AVP since 2012 as a participant and also as a facilitator myself. We believe in that there's a power of peace and good in everyone, which can transform our relationships. And from that belief is how AVP was sort of, it grew from that belief. It also can be defined as the conflict transformation program, which is found in over 60 countries worldwide. I belong to a group in Rwanda and also in South Africa. I'm a member of both South Africa and Rwanda AVP groups. It is a training program that enables participants to deal with conflict and violence in a new and creative way. So what happens with that is that a team of trained AVP facilitators conduct experiential workshops And it's through these workshops that we hope that participants will gain the ability to resolve conflicts without resorting to manipulation, to cohesion, or just violence as the term itself. So AVP program is, as I mentioned, draws from shared experiences because it's an experiential workshop. We have participants who probably 10 or 15 participants in one workshop, and those participants will be sharing through their experiences and learning from one another. The history of AVP comes from Friends or Quakers. I'm not sure if people are familiar with who Quakers are, but I'm a Quaker myself, and it's a peace. It's a peace movement. It's a religious movement, but it's also a peace sort of education where we learn from the belief that there's that of good in everyone. And so it's through that we use interactive exercises and activities and games and role plays to basically examine the ways we can respond to situations where injustice is present and which anger can lead to aggressive behavior and violence. We work in communities and in prisons. So through, though it is funded by Quakers, AVP draws from participants and facilitators from all faith traditions, from all ethnicities, and technically all walks of life, really. So it is therefore a program for everyone, and a program for everyone, everywhere. And it's just a network of volunteers that are working together to find ways, creative ways in resolving conflict without resorting to violence. In terms of our methodology, we have 3 workshops. Usually we have the basic workshop, advanced workshop, and the training for facilitators workshop. So the basic workshop looks at mainly on affirmation and communication exercises. So this draws from knowing self before you can engage with others. And then the advanced workshop is looking at working within a community. So working around other people's beliefs, other people's feelings. So how can we work together, my feelings and your feelings, how can we work within that in a harmonious way? And then training for facilitators is basically taking everything you've learned from the basic workshop and the advanced workshop and applying it as a facilitator yourself. Because at the end of the day, we all learners, we all teachers within ourselves. So what better way than to share with your community in a trust environment, in a safe environment. And yeah, so the general gist of AVP is that participants work together to identify the root cause of violence as well as the root cause of peace. So we need to know what peace is before we can understand what a violent situation potentially is or what violence means. Next slide. Right. So when we think about AVP, what is the thinking behind AVP? Our thinking behind AVP is that we understand that violence comes in different forms. As Ruth has also mentioned, there is a lot of different forms of violence, including physical, sexual. So as you can see on the screen, I have highlighted a bit of those, but there's a lot more. Violent situation or violence as a term or as a word itself is a really difficult one to explain, but it comes in different forms. And we also understand that conflict is natural and a normal part of life, and that is, but it is possible for us to learn new and creative ways of handling it. And that's what AVP learnings or AVP thinking is when we are in a workshop and when we're introducing it to communities, to the youth, to schools and companies and other urban communities. So we work in and like I said, it's for everyone. So in that sense, it is we work in different settings. Next slide. When we think about AVP, there's 5 pillars to it. So as I mentioned before, we have what we call affirmation. That is our first pillar. So affirmation is looking at Sorry, that's my nephew behind making that noise. Apologies. So when we're talking about affirmation, we're looking at the exercises that help improve our listening skills and also share on what is good about the other person, which is something that we don't necessarily do, we don't do enough of. And this is one way to first know yourself and able to help the other person or to understand the other person and where they're coming from. The second pillar is on communication. So this pillar is looking at improving our communication skills, and it forms part of an essential part of our workshop, as everything that we do around AVP requires a good communication or where good communication and good listening skills. The third pillar is cooperation. So cooperation is looking at group dynamics. So groups can take different forms even without communicating verbally. So we're trying to explore and experientially exploring how a group of people can work together and how they can come up with one idea, consensus at the end of the day. So we have different exercises that look into, I'll be happy to share those exercises, but because of time, I will just move on. We have also pillar 4, which is the community building. So this is group construction. So how do we choose the groups that we belong to? So we have, for instance, if I go to work, I know certain people that I trust to say something to, or even within a friend dynamic, because a friends group is an actual community building exercise. So we do a lot of trust exercise, which help build a sense of community. These are fun games and shared stories, and again, experiences. I'll be using that word quite a lot because AVP draws from experiences and learning from one another. And then finally, our 5th pillar is transforming power. So transforming power is a key element of AVP in preemptive conflict resolution. And so we believe that by creating creatively transforming unhealthy relationship through sharing and caring and improved communication skills, or even surprise and humor can build a great foundation for nonviolence action. So dealing with a violent situation, a potentially violent situation, and turning it into a nonviolent one. Within the transforming power, the wheel on the right is looking at the 5 principles of transforming power. I mentioned before, respecting for self, which is knowing self. So within that inner core of transforming power, we need to know ourselves, and we need to believe that we care for others as well. And from that, we can build the expectation of expecting the best, think before reacting, and ask for a nonviolent path whenever we are dealing with a potentially conflict situation. So these are all exercises that we do, and with these key principles, we are able to transform power from, again, from a violent situation into a non-violent situation. Next slide. So AVP in practice. So this is some examples that where AVP has worked. And one example is coming from Rwanda, which is the success of the training of Gacaca judges in Rwanda in 1994. And so Gacaca is a traditional community courts in Rwanda. So Gacaca means on the grass. So how that came about in community leaders would gather people together, often literally on grass, and they would resolve family and community disputes by listening to all parties and then deciding what should be done. So one of the key examples that came out of that success was obviously the active learning and ownership. So and then listening skills, the trio violence, which is what you're seeing there on the left. So the three outlines, apologies, participants brainstorm where violence comes from. And the words that come up with from that brainstorm is what we write on the violence part. And that is the root of the tree. And then, for example, you can say jealousy and resentment, anger, all of these are roots of violence, and then on the other side, we brainstorm the fruits of violence, which is beating, lying, or stealing, or killing. So that is the violence tree. And then we go to look at the non-violence tree, and we do the same process again. And then we have, in Johannesburg, South Africa, the program received a service provider accreditation and national qualification status under the name AVP Papama, which I was also affiliated with for quite a long time. So it's just training of community workers who mentor school leaders and positive response from community workers. We worked with a lot of primary school children, urban communities, rural communities, and it has gained some great respect from the community. Also, AVP has been known to help reduce violence within prisons. As I mentioned, we work in prisons as well. I personally do not have a great experience working in prison, but this is where AVP was born. It was born out of a prison setting. And there's a lot of testimonies you can find on the website when in terms of prisoners engaging in AVP and also facilitating within the prison walls as well. And then we have AVP has also been known to improve interpersonal relationships and reduce incidences of domestic violence. So it can be used as a medium for parents, for any family member, and you can bring the families together, or you can have them separately. So we usually want to have children separate from their parents when we have a similar but different project, which is called HIP, Help Increase Peace Project. So this is more of the youth manual than AVP. So AVP is more for the adults or for the, and then for HIP is looking at the youth. So the youth would be working separately from their parents, and that way we can have a safe space for somebody to share openly, and hopefully that would build a good community setting for those children. Next slide, please. So AVP and resolving parental conflict, how can that work? So we know that there's gender-based violence and violence against children are significant problems around the world and in many family structures. And as I mentioned, AVP is open to all ages, and it can be structured for different groups, and it's also open for all genders. So our workshops are not aligned with any particular faith, but it does grow up from that, what I mentioned before, that there's that good of in anyone, which is a Quaker belief as well. So it works to look at community mobilization and gender transformative programming and promising approaches to address and reduce violence. There's also an increase in interest in finding ways to address multiple forms of violence simultaneously. I think Ruth has also mentioned within their organization that there's very similar practices and very similar exercises. And I feel like resolving parental conflict can definitely be something that, AVP programming and other programs similar to AVP can be a good way to resolving parental conflict. So incorporating anti-violence program for both men and women and emphasizing respect, not just for the adult in the room, but also for the child, knowing the child's right and respecting and listening to the child's voice is a good practice, and it does start from there. And this may serve to reduce violence within a home and also intimate partner violence. And lastly, on this slide is parental conflict is common in many families, as we know. So reducing this type of chronic interpersonal conflict and tension can definitely help children feel the emotional security that they need for a healthy mental life. And not only when they're children, but also when they become adults. So we can avoid that rehabilitation part. So we start when they're young in teaching them all these beautiful tools in in how to engage violence situation with a non-violence practice. Next slide, please. So positive parenting without violence, how does it look like today? So first of all, positive parenting in sub-Saharan Africa is underdeveloped and inadequate, but there are increasing encouragement when we look at different organizations that are talking on positive discipline. So fewer countries have policies that focus specifically on positive parenting, or the framework of positive parenting into which is integrated and is defined as a priority. So that is one thing that we can look at and say, yes, there is some good that is happening. And if we're all familiar with the word positive discipline, is obviously abolishing the humiliating punishment that children face at school and at home. As Babs actually mentioned earlier on when we were just talking earlier, there's a lot of also cultural practices that has influenced the positive discipline campaign. And one great resource is from Save the Children, which is a positive discipline everyday parenting. I'm happy to share that. But this looks at concrete answers to questions about positive discipline in everyday parenting. What is that? And it also sets out clear principles of, for instance, how parents can set goals, how they can create a positive home environment, how they can help themselves understand how children think and how children feel, and just the problem solving in a challenging situation, basically. So they will practice a lot of hands-on skills from this manual of positive parenting. And I cannot stress it enough. There's some great examples and some great tools within that, within the book that can really help not just the children themselves, but also their parents, educators, support workers, professionals who basically work with parents and children in whatever capacity. Another great resource is the World Report on Violence Against Children, which looks at, has some great recommendation, as I've just outlined there, promoting nonviolent communication, relationships, respecting the whole of a child and their family, and increasing understanding of child development. It is really important that we understand the child development from an early age, and from that and how we can deal with when a child has a tantrum, how can you deal with that without humiliating the child, without putting down the child, and just listening and understanding there is always something behind somebody's actions. So it's just a matter of trying to find that. Next slide, please. So we look at how can Alternatives to Violence Project help you as an individual. So AVP basically, as a whole, what we as facilitators, what we want to see at the end of the workshop is that there is some sort of understanding on how to manage feelings of anger, of fear, and there's also how to deal more effectively with risk and threatening situation. How can this, we have one exercise that also Ruth touched on, which comes in a different name for us. It's called I messages. So responding in a non-blaming way. So the I messages, basically, if you're engaging in a conflict situation, you are not blaming the other person. So you would, instead of saying, you did this, you did that, I would say, I feel that, you just start with I feel, because that was already taking away that person. You're not blaming them, but you're also not enticing them to just go in a defensive mode where then it will become a conflict situation. But instead, you are sharing your feelings, and in hope of them understanding and seeing where you're coming from in terms of why you're feeling the way you're feeling. AVP also helps build good relationship with other people, recognizes that conflict management skills you already have, and it also hopefully helps you understand why conflict happens and approaches conflict in more creative and less creative ways. And finally, it considers your own relationship to systems of violence. Like I said, it's an experiential training. And once you understand your own relationship to the system of violence, then you learn to understand others' people's view of violence, and we can find a way that a creative and a new way that we can deal with that violence. And yeah, my last slide is just wanted to leave you with this great quote from Nelson Mandela. I like this. The first part is really strong and speaks to me quite a lot, which is peace is not just the absence of conflict, which is alternatives to violence, basically. That is, within that word, we've already spoken what alternatives to violence is. So just because there's no conflict does not mean that there is peace. But what is behind a conflict? What is peace? What is conflict? We need to understand all of those roots for us to be able to have the peace of mind, to have a healthy mental health, and also understanding how different structures can affect ourselves, our feelings, the people around us, the children that we are working with, the children that are in our family structures, and the parents that are raising these children. So thank you so much, and back to you.
Right, I've unmuted myself. Thank you very much for that. I can see that there are a lot of tools there that will be useful, not just in the family court, but when we're talking about, kind of conflict management. I think that also is very useful in the workplace, and even within communities. I mean, in a lot of countries where there's a lot of conflict, we take Nigeria for example, a lot of intra-community conflict, and you talk about that code, the on the grass code, the Gachacha code. Yes, no, that sounds very interesting. Probably like maybe the traditional codes or the customary codes that are run in some other countries. But no, that's very comprehensive. And I'll be grateful for a copy of that report you referred to. And I'm sure I'll be able to share it with other participants. Right, so that brings us on to our third speaker, Taiwo Aklami. Taiwo has been an advocate for child rights for well over 21 years. He's a consultant and a curriculum developer, parenting educator, blogger, and family lawyer. And I'm grateful for Taiwo to coming on. I think this is probably his third time that he's been speaking about child issues on this platform. And I can remember the last time he spoke, and he gave some very sobering statistics about child rights or the lack of it. And today, I suppose we are looking at child rights from a parental point of view, which is really where it all starts from. So thank you, Taiwo.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be with you again. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself listening to the speakers that have gone ahead to bring unusual perspectives to the conversation at hand. I don't know if I can share my screen. I want to share a slide. If I can be unable to share my screen, I'd like to share my slides. Okay, while I'm waiting for that, thank you very much for the work that you do in terms of bringing the relevance of the law to the day-to-day lives of the people. As I was having a conversation with a colleague this morning, I said that the law rules all things. The foundation of modern society is predicated upon the law. When the society moved from the rule of force, we moved to the rule of law. And so if we move to the rule of law, They are therefore codification of ethics, of behavior, of dealings, everything that has to do with human interaction has to do with the law. And so the place of the law cannot be emphasized. That's why I'm glad to be looking at the subject matter of the role of the family court in parental conflict. And I want to start by trying to unbundle the theme that we have chosen for today, which is first look at parental conflict. What exactly are they? Now, I think the first thing is that in my work with parents and working with children and working with different families, I think that there's a mistake that we always make. We always think that because we are closely knitted, because we are families, crisis may never arise. So we hardly put in place the machinery to resolve crises when they arise, so that a lot of times when conflicts arise, they meet us like a thief in the night. It's as if we are in a fool's paradise, never thinking that it may become a day where we may have to look at issues differently. As long as human beings have different perspectives to life, our experiences are different, which inform our perspectives. Our perspectives will always mean that no matter how close we are, no matter how loving we are, there will be conflict. Conflict is inevitable. Where I come from, I'm told that there's a Yoruba that says that even the tongue and the mouth, they do disagree. So disagreement is key, but it's something we don't pay attention to. We just start a relationship, boundaries are not defined, and we just continue. Conflict happens, and we are left in the lodge. We are not able to know what to do. That's number one. Number two, it's important to understand that the concept of parenting is today bigger than the concept of family. The concept of parenting is today seem bigger than the concept of family. Why? Because there are many parents who are raising children outside the family. It's important to understand that though the ideal thing for us is that we want a situation where children are raised within the family. But the reality on ground is that we have more children being raised outside the family than within the family. So because of that, when we talk about parenting, it is assuming a larger dimension, a larger subject matter, a larger conversation, bigger than the conversation of the family. But the truth of the matter is that it is a reality that our world is yet to come to terms with, particularly in Africa. We are yet to come to terms with the fact that children are being raised outside the family. So it is important for us to evolve a mechanism that can help people to resolve crisis without making children the victim in the circumstance. So having said that, I need to quickly say that when we talk about parental conflict, you know that conflict happens between parents that are married, conflict happens between parents that are separated, conflict happens between parents that are never married, they just have children. Conflict happen at different levels. So the truth of the matter, therefore, is that we cannot look at conflict without looking at children and looking at the impact of conflict on children, because I think the point of intervention at the level of the family court is to promote the best interest of the child. Let me give you an example. The family court in Nigeria, particularly, let me use Lagos State as a case study that has a thriving family court, is established under the Child Rights Act. I see section 419, section 4149 of the Child Rights Act establishes the family court as at two levels. We have the family court at the magistrate court. We have the family court at the high court. Now, the high court is both an appellate court and a court of first instance. So also but the magistrate court is a court of first instance. But you see, when it comes to divorce, for example, the family court, the family high court, and the state high court have concurrent jurisdiction, which means you can begin a divorce proceeding in a family court in Lagos State. You can also begin that same proceeding in the state high court. Now, that is to show that the focus of the family court a lot of times has to do with the involvement of children. So the fact that it is called family court does not mean that they will always restrict themselves to matters that happens within the family. They are more interested to matters that happen to children, either within the family or outside the family. And that's what it forms the constitution of their city. The constitution of the family court, you have the judge, you have assessors. As a matter of fact, at the magistrate court, the family court sits with one magistrate and 2 assessors. At the high court, the family court sits with 2 assessors also. Now, these are assessors most of the time that are knowledgeable in matters that has to do with children, child development, social welfare, and all of that. Now, that is to show that at the end of the day, the focus of society when conflict happens is the child. That is very, very important. We should stress that, because at the end of the day, the child is the defenseless subject. Because the child is defenseless subject in matter of parental conflict. Most of the times, conflict happens because of children, but conflict don't happen with consultation with children a lot of times. So a lot of times, conflict with children, with surprise. As a matter of fact, my wife came from a broken home, the parents separated when she was 12 years old. But they've been having a conversation about separation since when she was 8 years old. Unfortunately, the parents thought she was not aware of that conversation, because they had those conversations after they thought they've talked the children into their beds. But unfortunately, because as a young girl from age 7 to 8, she has noticed the tension in the family. And so she knew that something was going on that the parents were keeping away from them. So when the parents thought she's gone to bed, or they have gone to bed, herself and her brother, they woke themselves up to listen in on conversations that was going on between the father and the mother as to how the marriage was not working, and how one day they will need to bring it to an end. And that had unusual impact on our psyche, on our peace, on our development as a person. And so finally, when the conflict came to a head and they have to be separated, the 2 children that were involved were the most hit. Meanwhile, we see parents nursing their wound. We see mothers saying, the man has treated me unjustly. We see fathers saying, the woman has treated me unjustly. We see women saying, this marriage is a mistake. We see men saying that I married my enemy. In all of that conversation, we hardly take into cognizance the impact of all of that on children. And that is why I want to premise my presentation around the implication of the actions that we take at the level of parental conflict and the role of the family court vis-a-vis the best interest of the child. And let me begin with our belief system as a people. Now, when you say family court in an African setting or in a Nigerian setting, it sounds like a malapropism. It sounds like you can't have a court for a family, because families don't go to court. Where I come from, they say you don't come back from the court and be family members. That's one of the thinking of the people here. So when you hear court, it doesn't go with family. So there's a lot of orientation that still needs to take place for people to know that, well, a family court can sit and resolve matters. A lot of times when people approach the family court from my experience, they don't approach the family court for justice. They approach the family court for 3 things. Number 1, foreclosure. I want to prove that I'm correct. The way you are going about this matter is wrong, and I need somebody to validate my position. Number 2, they want to validate they want to validate that they have a trophy. So when they finally get custody, I see the way clients rejoice for getting custody. And I'm asking the question, this custody that you have gotten, is this your rejoicing because of the fact that you now have custody, or because of the fact that you have won again? I have defeated you again. The court has finally awarded me custody. That's number 2 reason. The number 3 reasons why people approach the family court is the genuine reason of saying, okay, I want the best interest for this child. For example, a man who is not responsible for child support, for upkeep, and the woman is laboring, and the woman feels that, okay, what I need to do is to approach the family court so that the family court can rule on the issue of of upkeep. So having said that, so I want to say quickly that when you look at all of this, what I always tell clients is this: there are things we can do before conflict arise when children are involved to ensure that we protect the children. Because my concern is not about going to the family court, really. Because we may go to the family court, the woman may be satisfied, the man may be satisfied, but the child is not satisfied. And when the child is not satisfied, though the man, wears his garment of victory, though the woman displays her trophies of victory, the society is still the loser. Because at the end of the day, the child is already in a difficult position by virtue of the fact that there's a conflict. Now, when the conflict is resolved in a way that the court thinks they've represented the best interest of the child, but in actual fact, the best interest of the child has not been represented, what has been represented is the inability of the court to probe into the inner workings of the relationship between the couples who are involved, and on the basis of what they can see, they have concluded that this is the position, and they've given judgment in a way that appears to be in the best interest of the child, when in actual fact it's not in the best interest of the child. So I'll give you a quick example. So you talk about custody matter, and a woman, okay, let me leave that example because it's a bit, the example is a bit sensitive, so let me leave that. So I want to see if I can share my slide and show you some. Okay, now, thank you very much, sir. I think I have, okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, good. So these are basically, so let me go to, so let me start from here. The matters that often go to the family court or that become, disputable matters before the court. It is also important to note that if two angels are raising children, there will be conflict. Because between a perfect God and an imperfect man, there's still conflict. So it should have been that the relationship between man and a perfect God should not generate conflict. But there's conflict everywhere. So in Godfather, they said there's treachery everywhere. So there's conflict everywhere. Conflict is inevitable in the relationship between two people who are trying to raise children. Now, upkeep matters to go to court. And when we talk about upkeep, there's an area the family court in Nigeria is not looking at, which I've tried often to bring to the attention of stakeholders. Now, when you talk about upkeep, we live in a country where social welfare is zero. When you are raising children in this climate, is everyone to himself, God for us all. You're on your own. You run your family as a local government chairman. You are responsible for electricity. You are responsible for school fees. You are responsible for health care. You are responsible for everything. When you don't have resources, your children sit at home. And for example, in Lagos State, there are 18,000 private schools competing with 1,700 public schools in a state of over 20 million people. So you find that education in Lagos State, for example, is in the hands of the private sector. So you are dealing with all of that. Then look at COVID era. People have lost their job. People are out of business. So they are dealing with a lot of economic crunch. When a father appears before the family court and is saying, I don't have, most of the time, most of the inquiries we are doing is to the extent of what is he doing to have. We are not looking at the pressure that the family has imposed on the family or the person. We just say that produce. And a lot of times, when we don't do that social inquiry, to look at the capacity of the person involved, to look at where the state needs to step in the area of upkeep. Because I hardly see the judgment of the court asking the state to step in. I see the judgment of the court or the position of the court saying that when you decided to have children, don't you know you are going to feed them? You are trying to punish their mother. And the man is trying to say, look, I don't have. I've lost my job. and they are saying, whatever you do, just make sure that you make this one available. So the judge will ask, are you eating? We say, yes, I'm eating. Do you clothe yourself? You say, I clothe myself. Do you go out? I go out. Do you come in? I come in. Do you take transport? You take transport. Yeah, if you do all of that, I mean, you should be able to do that for your child also. You are being selfish. Why we know there are people who are selfish, who are ungodly. They want to visit the sin of the father or the mother on the child. But there are people who are genuinely in crisis, even if they are in a marriage and there's no conflict, they will still be dealing with the issue. That is number one issue. Number two issue is custody. We need to deal with custody from time to time. And you see, I've dealt with bizarre cases of custody where one parent decides to punish the other parent with full custody to the extent of denying the other parent access to the child. There's a new phenomenon we are dealing with working with schools now. A parent brings a child to school and says, I'm the one paying the school fees of this child. Please, I want to warn you. There's a man who calls himself my husband. There's a woman who calls herself my wife. I don't want him or her to have access to these children. I am the one you should deal with. So problem happens where one of the parents who have been declared persona non grata shows up finds out that the child is in a particular school and want to have access to the child. And so the school is saying that we cannot give you access. What we have advised schools to do is that when a parent brings a child to you and says that I want exclusive custody, I don't want anybody, the father or the mother, to have access. I think we ask you to show us the judgment of a court order that gives you custody. There's no court order that is going to give you absolute custody. Even if you have custody, there's supervised custody, there's supervised visits. So you can't have 100% custody at any time. So it is important, so that's another issue. Visitation right. We have parents who have used custody or visitation as a way of getting to another child, other parent, which I've said. Issues related to dissolution, and then the battles can be fierce, sometimes even to the detriment of the child. That is the truth. Most of the time, most of the cases we have dealt with, the children are always at the bottom of the pyramid. They are always the ones that suffer. And so, though the court is set to handle such, I'm trying to move such cases, we should, however, be informed and that there can always be amicable means of resolution of cases. And as I've said before, I think the foundation of resolution is for parties to agree from the beginning. How do we resolve crisis? Is to envisage that there will be crisis. In any marriage, there will be conflict. Don't let me say crisis. Crisis is the higher level. There can be conflict without crisis, because crisis and conflict are not the same thing. But it is mismanaged conflict that leads to crisis or crises. So it is important for us to note from the beginning that there will be conflict. If we agree that there will be conflict, it is important for us to agree that how are we going to resolve the conflict. Let me give you an example. When you are drafting a contract today, you put there how to resolve conflict. You put alternative resolution. This is how we are going to resolve the conflict if conflict arises. If in a relationship that is not as intimate as raising children as a country, that's not as intimate, we have provisions for how to resolve conflict. How much more when it comes to a relationship as intimate? Our perspectives are going to be different. When parties decide to go their separate ways, there's going to be issue of upkeep, there's going to be issue of custody. All of these are issues. There's a case I'm handling right now where the woman has just disappeared. So please, when I say woman, I'm not trying to, I'm just stating the facts as they are. I'm not trying to hoodwink. I'm not trying to put women as the issue. You understand? But I'm saying that there's a case we're handling right now where the mother of the child has disappeared with the child. The father had access before, but the mother just felt she was done and went away. So what do we begin to do? I think the primary thing is for us to resolve from the beginning. How do we handle our crisis? Number two, our conflict. Number two is to resolve that we will do everything in the best interest of the child. And that's why I always suggest when marriage don't work, we should do everything to make it work. But when it is not working and the life of one of the parties is in danger, we can begin to look at separation. But in looking at separation, we must make sure that in all our conflict, we protect the best interests of the child. The role of the court at every point in time must be to see to the protection and the defense of the best interests of the child. So that at the end of the day, even when we resolve conflict, even when we resolve all of these things, we are able to still ensure that the child is, the sanity of the child is preserved. Please note, it is almost impossible for children to have their sanity intact when there's conflict in the family or amongst parents. As a matter of fact, one of the definitions of abuse is tension between the people that are raising children. Violence, when children experience violence, for example, conflict that leads to, that now escalate to violence, it is said that it has unusual impact on these children. They go through traumatic disorder, post-traumatic disorder as a result of conflict in the home. So, as I said before, the family court is established by section 4149 of the CRA, both at the federal level and at the state level. The court has two levels, that is the High Court Division and the Magistrate Division. The family court at the High Court level shall consist of such members, as I've said before, a judge and an assessor who are able to, but the characteristic of the assessor is what is important here for me to stress. Assessor who shall be officers not below the rank of Chief Child Development Officer, as shall enable the court to effectively perform its function under the Act. Very, very important. So then appeals lie to the High Court, to the court of the, at the High Court level, from a decision of the court at the magistrate level, in the same manner as appeals lie from the decision of the magistrate court to the High Court at the state level. The High Court can therefore sit as a court of first instance or an appellate court. As I said before, appeal goes from the High Court to the Court of Appeal, according to section 152, subsection 5. The court at the magistrate level shall be duly considered if it consists of a magistrate, two assessors, one of whom shall be a woman, and the other person who has attributes of dealing with children and matters relating to children, preferably in areas of child psychology education. The court at magisterial level has power to try offenses and deal with all matters not specially assigned to the court at the High Court level. Proceedings under these rules shall be commenced by way of an originating motion filed by the family court registry, filed at the family court in the family court registry, at the High Court, at the magistrate court, as the case may be. The originating motion shall contain the relief or remedy sought, the full name and address of the applicant, including telephone number, email address, if any, and the full name and addresses of the respondent or respondents, including telephone number and email addresses, if known, of the applicant. Where the originating motion is filed by a legal practitioner, they shall also contain the address within the jurisdiction of the court, telephone number, and email addresses of the legal practitioner. The originating motion shall be supported by a statement of case. These are legalese, of what the process is of a start. And I'm running through it because some of us may want to understand if I've already crossed the bridge of not being able to resolve my matter without it degenerating into a crisis, and I now need to approach the court, what are the things I can do? And again, it is also important to note that like every other court, you can plead your case in a family court. You may not need the services of a lawyer to plead your case in a family court. You may choose to present your case, plead your case. A lot of times, the matters involved, a lot of times are too intimate, they are too passionate, people are too involved, they want to say their own matter themselves. As a matter of fact, I've seen instances where witnesses continue to interject or continue to go outside. Lawyers have had difficulties in guiding their clients through examination in chief or cross-examination, or they've had serious difficulties, because, madam, can you stop? No, I cannot stop. Please, let me say this. And the lawyer knows that anything you are saying that I've not asked you to say may be used against you. This is the purpose of pre-trial briefing. But many families, many men, many women are not able to keep themselves within the guidance of lawyers. So a lot of times, I try to guide people before they go to the family court. I tell them, this is a simple matter. Just go say it, because there's a lot of things you can say when you are before the court. If you are not running your matter, your proceedings through a lawyer, that the judge will understand, that you are saying it as understand it. When the judge sees a lawyer, the technicality cap, the technicality signal, is on. And the judge also wants to be sure that the lawyer is conducting himself, properly, and is also respecting, all the technicalities and all of that. But when a lot of times I've directed people, I work with people behind the scene, is upkeep matter. How much is your husband earning? What proof do you have? How do you convince the court that you can afford this amount you're asking for? So I prepare them, they go before the court by themselves, and they plead their matter, they discuss their matter. A lot of times, when it comes to upkeep, a lot of times the judge just wants to listen to both parties in chambers. Just, okay, let me listen to both of you, and try as much as possible to calm them down, make it less cantankerous, and get them to see the need for them to represent the best interests of the child. So I'm going through all of these for those who may want to plead their own case. So, what about evidence given by a child? In any proceedings, whether civil or criminal, the evidence of a child may be given unsworn. A deposition of a child's sworn evidence shall be taken for the purpose of any proceedings, whether civil or criminal, if that evidence has been given on oath. Under the Evidence Act, a child of 14 years is allowed to give evidence under oath, while children below 14 give unsworn evidence, and it is admissible. So that is the end of my slide. Now let me conclude by saying that I love this conversation for three fundamental reasons. One, it gives us the opportunity to again speak to the best interest of the child in every situation. Number two, it gives us the opportunity to embark to expand the frontier of an advocacy, that parties should think about the fact that there will always be conflict. And as a relationship progresses, in the time of peace, it is important to agree as to what will govern our behavior when we disagree. For example, I have a family constitution. In my family constitution, my wife and I we have agreed as to how to resolve conflict. Now, we have code of conduct within the family as to what to do and what not to do in the times when we disagree. That's number one. Number two, if it becomes clear that both of us do not have solution to the situation, we have also appointed people who we have relationship with. Both of us have relationship. This is not official relationship. This is interpersonal relationship, personal relationship, people that we have believed in, both of us. And so we have identified those people as people we can speak to when we have situations that both of us are not able to resolve. And at what point do we agree that we have not been able to resolve our conflict? It is when we have had the opportunity of sitting down to look at it and we are not able to resolve it. Until we give ourselves fair hearing, no matter how long it's going to take, we do not report. My wife cannot do something that I believe I don't like, and the next thing I do is to call somebody we have said we are going to discuss with. No, that is going to be outside our own protocol of conflict resolution. We are first going to sit down, no matter how long it takes us. When we sit down and we discuss, if for whatever reason we are not able to find a common ground, then I'm going to put my wife on notice. My wife also is going to put me on notice that since we are not able to resolve this thing, I'm going to speak to so person. Now, my wife does not give me a shocker. When this person just calls me and say, your wife called me. No, when the person is calling me, my wife has already put me on notice And if I'm the one reporting the matter, I will put my wife on notice. And so these parties that we have identified have the authority to call us and say, okay, your wife spoke to me, your husband spoke to me and resolved the matter, and whatever, and it is our conclusion that in our marriage, we rather pursue justice than pursue who is right, who is wrong. So if at the end of the day, we don't even understand what is going on, we're not able to resolve it in a way that we bring closure. Our closure is a commitment to peace, a commitment to peaceful coexistence. And that's what we have operated in the last 15 years, is that it has not been a smooth marriage, it has not been a bed of roses, but I can say that it's a peaceful marriage to a very large extent. And considering the fact that my wife and I had our first child, after 15 years of marriage, just October 25th. And so, there were opportunities for tension. But that the fact that we did not have children for 15 years did not create any conflict, because we understood what we needed to resolve even before conflict began to show. Conflict from family members. What are you doing? Why don't you have children yet? What effort are you making? You, this man, you are not getting younger. Your wife is not getting younger. What are you people going to do? To ward off all of those pressure required a lot of agreement. And my wife and I had sat down when we began to see that the children were not coming, to agree on how we want to handle ourselves before members of immediate family and extended family. The number 3 reasons why I like this conversation is that it is unique. It is unique. It's bringing to the front burner of conversation of how we can begin to bring an advocacy to the family court in Africa, to let the family court understand that we need to change a whole lot of things. For example, how does the family court sit? When the family court sits, when lawyer comes in with wig and gown, all the regalia and people, and a child comes into court, the child does not feel the environment of a family. The child feels that there's a judge sitting up there, but you see, when you look at the way the family court sits in a country like South Africa, it is a formal court that sits as an informal, in an informal setting. How do we begin to deal with such issues? How do we begin to have judges in the family court who see their role as people who are interested in protecting the best interest of the child? Now, that is why, even when you file an application to say that you are done, you want to divorce, it is part of our law for the judge to have a meeting with the couple to see if this matter can still, even when couples say the marriage is irretrievably broken down, it is the responsibility of the judge to still have meetings to see if it is possible to resolve this matter. With these few points of mine, I hope I've been able to convince you, not confuse you, and not complicate your matters. Even before we started this conversation, I've said a lot. I hope I've made sense to you, and I'm ready for further questioning. Examination in chief, cross-examination. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Taiwo. I hope you can still hear me. I can't. Yes, there you are. Yes, thank you very much for that. No, very interesting. I must say on some of the points you touched on about, the motives of families coming to court, closure, custody, what we call child support, maintenance, visitation rights dissolution. I mean, to those who work in the family justice in the UK, I mean, these are issues we deal with every day. I think parents in conflict are the same everywhere. But you do raise some interesting points about the kind of constitution of the court, because yes, in England the courts are less formal. We tend not to have children present. I can remember a few days ago I had an application where a 15-year-old wanted to attend, and because there were a lot of things that were going to be said about the parents. Parents had been involved in drugs and and all kinds of issues, it would have been too upsetting for the child to hear. So as much as possible, the courts try not to have the children present. But having said that, and it's interesting you talk about the role of assessors. And I think what Ruth alluded to earlier on when she was talking about CAFCAS, which is the struggling to remember what Kafka stands for, but basically they are like family court advisors, so probably similar to the assessors. And they are the ones who actually act as the voice of the children. So be it a 5-year-old child or 12-year-old child, Kafkas will go and speak to that child and say, and elicit the experience of living in a household where parents are separated, and they do so in a child-focused way. So, probably making use of the books that Ruth referred to, finding out, for example, who is important in your life, and they can mention, mom, maybe sister, maybe the cat, maybe mom's new partner, maybe the person that Kafka's Children and Family Court Advisory and Support Service. Thanks, Ruth. Yes, who the child perceives as, important in his or her life. And if the child hasn't seen the separated parent, in most cases, the father, then, it might not be captured in that child's mind because for a young child not seeing the other parent, say for a few months, the way children view time is different from the way adults view time. So, not seeing a parent for a few months, for a child, that's almost like a lifetime. So Kafka tends to be the voice of the child. But no, I think that there have been a lot of interesting points raised that I hope the audience has found this session useful. I'm just seeing whether there are any chats or comments, or if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question or a comment, just briefly introduce yourself and just a short question or comment, please. That would be fine. But whilst we're waiting for that, so Odette had to give her apologies because she's 3 hours ahead of us, and but she had said I'll be in touch with her and be able to get a copy of the document she referred to, and if anybody wants it, then please just drop me a line, send me an email to cjaglaw@gmail.com. If you don't mind just typing that in the chat. And I think Ruth also referred to the websites and the documentation she uses for the Separated Parents Information Program, which, like I say, does make quite a difference, I think, in parents' understanding. And I think that those are some of the points that Taiwo has been talking about as well. So, right, okay, yes, thank you. That's on there. So, yes, like I say, Taiwo, I'm always happy to take this conversation forward, especially with judges or assessors and others involved in the justice system in Nigeria, so we can keep this conversation going. Right, thank you. And Ruth has sent the link to the handbook and about the course, which is on kafkas.gov.uk. I mean, I use that website quite a lot, and there's a lot of useful information for parents and for professionals as well. And I also referred to the parenting apps, like whether Close App or Family Wizard, that also is recommended in the family court. So I think, well, I don't think we have any questions. So, well, I can safely round up and just to say thank you very much to our speakers, Ruth Duckworth, Odette Ntambara, Taiwa Kilame, for giving up your time. And I know it's been quite a lot of hard work, having to put the slides together and so forth. This session is being recorded and it's going to be posted on YouTube. So, it's available to anyone who wants to watch it again. And thank you to the audience. I know on a Friday evening, it's difficult and people have been trying to make their way home. Right, thank you, Ruth. So those are references to App Close, yes, which is the app recommended. Like I said, that is free. So I don't know whether because it comes with the adverts. The other apps are available with a subscription. They are all available online if anyone wants to look at them. But I think they are useful tools going forward, just to help parents with communication. And I think, as Taiwo said, that is key really to any relationship, between adults and children. And of course, the setting of boundaries, even in our workplaces, in our businesses, there are certain protocols and so forth that we use really just to ensure an effective relationship and ensuring that we keep conflict to a minimum. I mean, some of the kind of topics that Odette spoke about, like I said, I think would be very useful tools, even when we're talking about, I was speaking to someone earlier today, for example, about border conflicts. And in a country like Nigeria, we know that's very much an issue. Even within a state or local authority, a lot of intra-border conflicts. And then we're talking about international border conflicts as well. So learning about, how to manage conflicts, I think is going to be very important going forward. So on that note, I say thank you to everyone, and I wish you all, a good weekend. Thank you.